The Writ by D.M. Glass. Raindrops echo throughout the concealed alleyway. A light storm is currently passing through the city. It's midday, and the sun can still be seen shining through what little clouds there are. The smell is perfect, as the rain and the spring scents intertwine in the air. Even with the light rain coming through, the streets of Daylor are still crowded. Every citizen eagerly awaited the king's arrival. They aren't the only ones. 4. No, maybe 5. Yeah, 5 hours seems about right for how long I've been here. I had spent considerable time choosing this location. It has great overhead coverage to conceal me from any potential overwatch. It's also just a few alleyways down from one of the guild doors. If something were to go wrong, I can always make a quick escape. A large bustling can be heard from the far-off distance. I slowly edge myself around the corner to get a closer look. The bright green cobblestone road is filled to the edge with people from all backgrounds. Although predominantly human, you can still find several orcs, dwarves, and the occasional pixie flying around. You can even see a few people carrying gnomes and nobles on their shoulders. I suppose they couldn't see anything otherwise. As far as the eye can see, the sidewalks are lined up and down with food vendors and trinket sellers as well. It's always busy during this time, but today is exceptionally busy. Dormant memories begin to surface. I'm reminded of how many times my father and I used to walk down this very street. He was a carpenter for most of his life. He worked on houses and built all sorts of furniture that he would sell here. The memories spark what little emotions I have left. It's uncomfortable. Focus, I tell myself softly while keeping my eyes on the crowd. The crowd begins to part down the middle, pushing people back onto the sidewalk. The vendor stand collapses from everyone trying to cram themselves into such a small area. It's time. Hunched over and limping, I begin to make my way up the sidewalk, hood over my head and basket in hand. Aye, fuck off, you nasty shit! My basket with a few coins goes flying. I look up to see an older gentleman. He's fairly built. Judging by the calluses and tan skin, he's likely a farmhand. I barely grazed him, and yet his face is filled with utter disgust. My apologies, sir, I say to him with the most intimidative voice and fake accent. He snarks at me and then redirects his eyes back to the show. I proceed to walk past him while carefully placing his wallet into my pocket. I just couldn't help myself. A slight smirk emerges across my face. I'm exceptionally skilled with sleight of hand. I have been ever since I was a child. Still, even so, sometimes I surprise myself. The sounds of horse hooves clapping against the cobblestone begin to rise above the crowd chatter. It's instantly overshadowed by a monstrous cheer from the citizens. That's when I see him. Crowned and covered in a red and purple robe. He's a monster of a man. As he stands up to wave at his citizens, he must at least reach 6.5 feet tall. His shoulders are broad, and his beard encapsulates true masculinity. His beautiful brown hair flows with the wind, reaching roughly to his ears. His name is King Darius. Surrounding him are several guards. One appears to be a knight of sorts, covered in full-plated white armor. He carries a long sword at his side, and his face is beautiful. This man looks heavenly in appearance, as if the gods themselves sent an angel to the king's aid. With eyes as white as snow and lips as elegant as a peach, he almost doesn't look like a man at all. It's hard to imagine someone so deadly could also be so elegant. On the king's other side is a much more brutish man, half-orc to be exact. His body is tanned and covered in scars. His hair is braided into a long ponytail, and the only armor he has are a pair of black gauntlets. On his back, he carries a massive two-sided battle axe. For most, this would be completely impractical, but something tells me that this man's entire life has been just that. Without blinking or smiling, he looks completely void of emotion. With his brilliant purple eyes looking off into the crowd, he carries a stare that can easily overpower any man. A slithering sensation climbs up my leg. "Welcome back, Alistair," I say to the little garden snake that is now moving on to my right shoulder.
"I have information,"
Alistair replies. I nod my head while keeping my eyes fixed on the king.
"The king has 4 sharpshooters on the balconies. You won't be able to see them, but you can trust my eyes."
"That's definitely a problem," I reply while lightly biting my lower lip, thinking about my next move.
"Unless you take them out, it wouldn't be wise to proceed."
The rain lights up completely, and the sun covers the area. Magic? Even with cloud coverage, there should still be subtle signs of even the best overwatch. I let out a dejected sigh. This mission went from unrealistic to impossible. I turn and walk back into a nearby alleyway.
"So that's it?"
Unfortunately for now, yeah, I respond begrudgingly.
"What will you do now, Desmond?"
He asks me with a perplexed appearance. If I'm ever going to complete this assignment, I'm going to need some help. I reply with an overwhelmed and defeated look on my face. "Alistair." After saying his name and snapping my finger, his image fades away as if he was never there to begin with. I myself fade into the darkness of the damp, shrouded alleyway. The adventure that was about to ensue was not something I had planned. Chapter 1: The Swordsman. The sounds of birds taking flight can be heard as I run past them on the rooftops of Daylor. The sun slowly descends with the day coming to an end. The heat is fading and the streets are clearing, as is normal for this time of day. It's been several days since I failed to complete my task. During that time, I had been gathering information throughout the city. I had come to the realization that completing my current writ alone would be nearly impossible. I would need help. Considerable help. Eventually, after a few bribes and receiving a few leads from my handler Aaron, I finally found a potential ally. His name is Monty, a vagabond swordsman from nowhere. From what I've gathered, he's a young man from overseas. He's slowly built up quite the reputation for hunting magical beasts. I hear the sound of Alistair screeching in the distance as he dives down to a rooftop several blocks away. That's one of the advantages of having a pact with the shape-shifting demon. For the most part, I have a reliable scout that can always go undetected. After several leaps and tumbles, I managed to catch up to him. "Looks like I made it in time," I say while trying to catch my breath. Alistair looks back at me, eyeing me up and down with a curious look. I suppose he's a bit caught off guard by my choice of apparel. I was wearing my guild outfit, a black canvas cloak. On its back is the guild symbol, a gray diamond with a standing dagger in the center. My face was also covered by a black wooden mask. The mask has very little shine to it, however its markings are unique in nature. Golden lips have been carved and painted on, with golden stripes running vertical over the eye holes. These are the markings of the guild, the edges of shade.
"Yes, we're about to start."
I look down to inspect the scene. The street has mostly cleared out as businesses tend to shut down before dark. The marketplace is a long major road in the city, with many alleys and off-branching roads coming from it. The market itself extends from the entrance of the kingdom walls all the way to the rich district of Daylor. The road is named Merchant's Road, after all the foreign travelers and small businesses that use it. Nothing seems unusual, but still, I can sense the thickness in the air from my own anticipation. Let's see how he does, I say while concealing my profile. Intently staring at the city streets, the silence grows deafening. There. I point to a young man walking toward us from the western end of the street. He's a human standing at roughly 5'5". He has curly indigo hair that extends down to his ears with a ponytail in the back. His clothes are plain in color, a gray loose top with baggy brown pants. The part that stands out the most to me isn't his stature or clothing, but the weapon he carries. A wooden sword? I'm immediately taken back by this. Even low-tier magical beasts are incredibly dangerous. I've only ever encountered 3 myself, and barely lived to tell about it. For anyone to fight a magical beast with a mere wooden sword is ludicrous. I hear the sound of a deep and sinister laugh coming from the alleyway across the street. 4 men emerge from the shadows, revealing themselves to Monty. They spread themselves across the road, blocking all routes moving forward. Each man is bald, wearing loose martial arts clothing. They're all average in build as well, except for one, and I recognize him. His name is Bill. He's one of the leaders of this group of misfits. Bill stands at a whopping 6'4" and is covered in scars and tattoos. The most notable tattoo is a spiderweb on his scalp. It's detailed and realistic, not like the rest.
Can I help you?
Monty's voice is unique to me. His accent is definitely foreign. Now that he's finally closer, I can just barely make out his brown eyes. No, maybe hazel. His face is calm and collected, as if he's done this many times before.
He's not easily intimidated,
Alistair quietly remarks to himself. I nod my head while still maintaining my focus on the scene. You see, I had actually staged this meeting earlier. The men in front of us have done several odd jobs for the guild in the past. Most of them being delivery assignments, no questions asked kind. I'd only met them a few times before, but it was enough to know they'd do anything for a little silver. I need to know. Are the rumors true? What type of man is he? Questions begin to flood my mind as the tension reaches its boiling point.
We're just some guys that could use some spare change,
Bill says with a devious smirk on his face. The men begin to spread out even more, taking several steps at a time to close the distance.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint, my friend, but I don't have much, just enough for food. I'm just a wanderer, after all,
Monty says while reaching into one of his pockets, revealing it to be entirely empty.
Then we'll just take what you have.
One of the men speaks up with a high-pitched, weaselly voice. Wait, where'd he go? I'm not exactly sure when it happened, but one of the men completely vanished. He was hugging a wall just moments ago. Invisibility? Putting him up against a warlock was not part of my plan. This could get real bad.
Well, I definitely wouldn't.
From out of the ground, with the knife in his hand, the missing thug launches himself into the air behind Monty. Before anyone can realize what happened, the thug fell to the ground unconscious. His face now broken and black. The arm that was previously holding the knife is snapped in half, pointing in a direction it definitely shouldn't point. A silence enshrouds the fight, as each of the men need a moment to register what just transpired.
As I was saying, I definitely would not appreciate that.
I underestimated him. A switch flipped and his face changed. The soft and kind-hearted foreigner now had the eyes of a cold-blooded killer.
Boss, what just happened?
Bill takes a slight step back. Reading his face and stance, I can tell he doesn't quite know how to respond. He's trying to decide if he should run while he can or stay and fight. After several moments, Bill shakes his head to clear it.
Don't worry about it, boys. He can't take on all three of us at once.
Bill regains his composure as he takes a martial arts stance. His two remaining minions pull out pocket knives as they close in.
I guess this is how it's going to be,
Monty says with an irritated look on his face. Most people wouldn't see it, but I do. Underneath that annoyance and reluctancy to fight, I see a beast lurking. There's something inside him that he intentionally holds back. Something dark and twisted. It's like watching a man hold back a dangerous animal. Monty takes a martial arts stance of his own, with his sword tucked away at his side, ready to fight.
Now!
Bill shouts to his men, and they all charge.
Die!
The Weasley man shouts while jumping forward. With lightning speed, Monty lunges forward, slamming his sword into his gut. Bones shatter and crack as his body folds around the sword. The sheer force sends the man flying directly into Bill, knocking them both on the ground. When seeing his friend fly through the air like a rag doll, the third man slows his charge. That lack of focus costs him. In that moment of complacency, Monty closes the gap. With a strike to the knee and a finishing blow to his face, the man goes flying on top of his two friends. Bill is once again caught off guard by the second body falling on him. He manages to shove the two men off, but by then it's too late. Monty had leapt 20 feet in the air, and was now looking down on all of them with his sword over his head. What is this? His speed is definitely not human, and with the force of his strikes he can throw fully grown men like stuffed toys. I'm missing something. If it's magic, I'm not entirely sure how he's doing it.
What the?
Before Bill can finish his words, he's cut off by a sharp battle cry from above. I watch him carefully now. I take time to examine his lips, watching closely for any verbal components for a spell. I watch his hands for even the slightest movements that could signal the activation of magic. Monty falls with intense speed and strikes. As soon as his sword makes contact, a massive explosion occurs, sending dust and rocks everywhere. Alistair takes flight, and I'm forced to shield my face. The scene settles with pebbles lightly scattering across the streets. Bill's jaw is completely disconnected. Hanging much lower than it naturally should, his tongue rolls out and his eyes withdraw into the back of his head. He drops to his knees and then collapses. That was amazing. Monty puts away his sword and begins checking each of the men to see if they're alive. As soon as he's done, he then starts taking their belongings. This is my kind of guy, I think to myself in a joyful excitement. The daylight nears its end. As the streets grow dark, the lanterns begin to ignite in a brilliant light. Monty stops suddenly. He begins to move his head from left to right, curling his nose and inhaling deeply. He stands up slowly with his eyes closed, taking in the world around him. This might be the most confusing man I've ever met. From out of nowhere, a wooden sword flies directly past my face. The wind encasing his sword alone has enough force to blow back my hood, causing me to fall backward. How? I utter to myself in complete shock. I catch myself with one hand and immediately take off in a full sprint. How did he see me? I think to myself while jumping to the next rooftop. It doesn't take long before I can hear his footsteps closing in behind me. As I leap across the rooftop, I glance over my shoulder. He's there, with eyes of a raging storm and sword in hand. He's slower than before. Using all that magic must have worn him out. Magic always comes at a cost. This is a fundamental rule of our world, and there's no way around it, as far as I know. He must be near exhaustion. Think. I try my best to concentrate, thinking on the best route to take. It's difficult when you have a madman chasing you. Where is the closest? My thoughts are immediately cut off by a surge of wind behind me. I know it's coming, and there's only one way to avoid it. Down. I tumble forward, rolling myself off the ledge of a 2-story building, barely avoiding his sword. I reach for a ring on my right hand. It's a circular ring with a white gem in the middle. Around the gem are metal ridges for turning. Turning the ring clockwise. My body becomes transparent. Immense pain rolls through my body as I fall directly through the rooftop of a small business stand. I'm pretty sure I broke several ribs and I can't feel most of my left leg. With blurred vision, I look up to see Monty staring down on me from the rooftop. Extending his arm out in front of him, his sword instantly appears back in his hand. He lifts his left foot onto the ledge of the building, intently glaring down at me. Although I'm invisible, I still feel like he can see me. The sound of a whistle going off can be heard in the distance.
Hey! I think I heard something!
A guard shouts with a sense of urgency. Soon the sounds of many footsteps can be heard. My saving grace. A feeling of relief swells inside me. I can hardly believe I was just saved by the law. It's almost ironic. When I look back up to the rooftop, the indigo-haired swordsman had vanished. Now it's time for the easy part. I try to stand up to only find myself immediately back on the ground. The numbness in my left leg has completely vanished, and the pain replacing it is overwhelming. Alistair lands on a post behind me.
Desmond, you're not looking so good.
Not even looking back, I can see that nasty grin on his face. I suppose I shouldn't expect anything less from a demon. Alistair. Out of annoyance, I dismiss him. That little asshole can really get under my skin. I grab onto a nearby broken post. Pulling it from the rubble, I manage to lift myself out of the wreckage. The sound of the footsteps grows louder as the city guards approach with haste. I manage to limp into an alleyway across the street just before the guards came around the corner. I immediately recognize where I am. A left, right, and another left. I find myself standing in front of one of the guild doors. It's a heavily rusted steel door. It has no handle or lock and looks like it barely withstood the test of time. After pounding on the door 4 times in pairs of 2, a purple floating dial appears. The dial has numbers ranging from 1 to 50. In its center is an arrow that protrudes out, just enough to grab onto it. I place my fingers on the arrow, carefully turning it to the number 9, and push it in. The door unlocks and the dial vanishes, turning into a purple mist. I push my way through and close the door behind me. I made it. My muscles finally relax at the sight of my room. It isn't much. A desk, a bookshelf, a wardrobe, and a bed that looks like it could belong in a prison. It's cold, much colder than it was in the city. The floor and every wall is encased in stone. The room is barely lit from a dying candle. I make my way toward the desk, pulling out a drawer with my free hand. In it are several light blue vials. I take 2 of them and carefully roll onto my bed. One after another, I pop the corks and drink them both. My body begins to heal immediately. My bones pop back into place, and any cuts and bruises are now gone. A sudden surge of energy flows throughout my body, restoring me. Those vials have come in handy many times before. When you have a career like mine, you more than often find yourself broken and bloody by the end of the day. I laid there, eyes fixated on the ceiling. Thoughts of the foreign swordsman ran through my mind. He's become a sort of mystery to me. I close my eyes, and I think of that beast I had seen lurking within him. It brought a smile to my face, thinking about it. As I slowly drift off, the question comes to mind. Could he relate? I rest.